Humans draw the line at eating sentient beings. In a vast, endless universe where stars glimmer like jewels on a black velvet sky, there lies a small planet known as Neo-Terra City, a grand hub of commerce, a beacon of civilization amidst the chaos. This city, the heart of galactic trade, shone with neon lights that never dimmed, casting its glow across the cosmos. Here, anything was available for a price, from cutting-edge technology to the most bizarre delicacies that no one could have imagined. Max Hunter, a seasoned security expert with a past full of shadows and danger, walked into the Nebula Grill, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the galaxy. Today, he was here to unwind. A successful contract had just filled his pockets with credits enough to last a few comfortable months, and he was eager to enjoy a rare, peaceful evening. No jobs, no threats, just good food and a glass of strong liquor. He sat down at a polished table, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The atmosphere was calm. Luxurious alien species from all corners of the galaxy gathered, indulging in exquisite meals. It was a setting unlike any other Max had encountered in his many travels, and the ambiance itself seemed to whisper of secrets, of stories hidden beneath the surface. This was no ordinary restaurant. It was a journey into the unknown, into experiences that couldn't be had elsewhere. Max casually waved for the waiter. The atmosphere was serene, but there was something else, something Max couldn't quite shake, a feeling deep in his gut that something was wrong. He glanced at the menu on his holotablet. Something simple, familiar, a rare steak, the bloodier, the better. He wanted something that felt like home, even in this otherworldly place. A rare steak, as bloody as you can make it, he ordered calmly. As he waited, a strange sense of unease settled in his chest. It had been a long time since he had felt this way, this unshakable sense of something impending, something that would change everything. When the dish arrived, Max's eyes narrowed. It wasn't steak. Instead, a chained alien girl was escorted to his table. Her skin was pale and glowing faintly, and her eyes were filled with pure terror. She was dressed in ragged clothing, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The air around him seemed to shift. What was this? "This is your dish, sir," the waiter said with a cold smile, completely unaware of the shock creeping across Max's face. Max looked at the girl, her wide eyes pleading with him. For a moment, he was paralyzed. Then the cold reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't food. She was the meal. The realization came too quickly, too violently, but it was undeniable. This wasn't just about dinner. It was a test of his morals, his humanity. He locked eyes with the girl, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, please, don't eat me." Max's mind raced. Years of training, of surviving in the most hostile environments, told him to stay calm. But something within him shifted. He couldn't turn away. Not now, not from this. And with that, he made his choice. A rescue mission began, not just to save her, but to take down the sinister forces that ran the Red Vortex Syndicate and everything they represented. Max's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm, betraying none of the shock and anger he felt. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "I won't eat her," he said firmly, his gaze locked on the terrified girl. "But I will take her with me." The waiter blinked, momentarily taken aback, before a smile crept across his face. "Very well, sir. Our policy is to serve the dish here for optimal freshness, but if you wish to take it away..." His voice trailed off, unsure of how to handle the situation. Max didn't wait for further explanation. He reached into his pocket and slid his credit chip across the table. The amount was more than enough to cover the cost of the meal, and then some. The waiter's eyes widened in shock as he quickly bowed. "Of course, sir." No further questions. With the transaction complete, Max stood up and casually placed a hand on the girl's trembling shoulder, guiding her gently toward the exit. The entire room seemed to fall silent as they passed, the other diners either unaware or indifferent to what was unfolding. The guards near the entrance didn't move to stop them. They couldn't. Max had just paid for the meal. Outside, the neon lights of Neo Terra City flashed past in a blur as Max and the girl, still shackled, moved quickly toward his parked speeder. She walked stiffly beside him, her eyes darting nervously around as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. Max kept his focus, scanning the area, his instincts on high alert. The world around him felt different now, as if the weight of what he'd just done was settling in, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. There was no time. Max helped her into the speeder, taking a moment to make sure the chains were secure before pulling out a small tool from his belt. With a flick of his wrist, the shackles fell away. The girl, who had barely spoken a word since they left the restaurant, rubbed her wrists, relief flooding her face. She was free, but for how long? "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the speeder's engines. "I never thought anyone would help me." Max looked at her, his blue eyes softening. "You're safe now. We'll get you out of here." As the speeder shot into the air, racing toward the lower levels of the city, Max's thoughts were racing even faster. They couldn't stay in the open for long. The Red Vortex Syndicate wouldn't let this go. They would come for them, and they would come hard. But for now, they had to make it out of the city, find a safe place, and figure out how deep this conspiracy went. Max's mind was already running through the possibilities. A part of him felt a strange connection to the girl beside him, though he barely knew her. He wasn't about to let her fall back into the hands of the Syndicate. "You seem surprisingly calm for someone who just escaped being served as dinner," Max said, trying to lighten the mood, though his own nerves were anything but calm. The girl, whose name Max had learned was Lara Dune, let out a small, nervous laugh. "Trust me, I'm not calm. But after spending 3 days in their holding cells, anything is better than that." Max turned sharply as the speeder's sensors began to beep. He glanced at the rearview screen. 3 black speeders were tailing them, weaving through the traffic with unnerving precision. The Syndicate was already after them. Max's lips curved into a determined smile. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, pushing the speeder into overdrive. "Hold on tight, Lara. It's going to get bumpy." The speeder zoomed through the neon-lit cityscape, the buildings narrowing as they dove into lower levels. The pursuing vehicles, faster but more cumbersome, were hot on their tail, cutting through the thinning traffic with a growl of engines. But Max wasn't worried. He had dealt with worse. "They're closing in," Lara said, her voice steady despite the situation. Max's smile never wavered. "That's the plan." His hands flew over the controls, his mind calculating every move. He knew the city like the back of his hand. Watch this. In an instant, he cut the power to the engines, letting the speeder drop through the lower levels, between 2 massive skyscrapers. The Syndicate speeders followed, unable to match the maneuver at such high speed. Max re-engaged the engines at the last possible moment, pulling up mere meters from the ground. He dove into a narrow alley, the engines screaming as they skimmed over the ground, narrowly avoiding a crash. The pursuit vehicles, unable to navigate the tight spaces, shot past overhead, missing them by mere inches. Max's grin widened as he glanced at Lara. Fast doesn't always mean better. Lara, still gripping the safety harness, shot him a look of admiration mixed with disbelief. "Where the hell did you learn to fly like that?" Max's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Let's just say my resume includes more than just security work." The speeder continued to weave through the winding streets, losing the Syndicate in the maze of alleys and underground tunnels. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit faded, leaving only the hum of the engines and the soft rush of air through the city. Max glanced at Lara, who was visibly relaxing now that the immediate danger had passed. "We're safe for now. But we need to figure out what the Syndicate is really up to. And I have a feeling it's worse than we thought." Lara nodded, her expression darkening. "The Syndicate's been expanding their operations across the galaxy. But what I heard, they're more than just a criminal group. They're working on something far bigger. I overheard them talking about a Project Harvest." Max's brow furrowed. Project Harvest? What does that even mean? Lara hesitated for a moment before speaking again. They're experimenting on sentient beings, trying to create something. I don't know all the details, but I overheard enough to know it's not good. I'm just glad you got me out of there. Max's hands tightened around the controls. We're not done yet, Lara. Not by a long shot. We're going to stop whatever they're planning. As they sped through the winding streets of Neoterra City, Max couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only just beginning, and that the battles ahead would be far more dangerous than he had ever faced. But no matter what, he wouldn't back down. Not now. Not with Lara at his side. The city's underbelly was a maze of tunnels and abandoned sectors, a perfect hiding place for anyone looking to keep their operations out of sight. Max expertly navigated the speeder through the decaying streets, heading toward the Genetic secure facility, a place Max had visited once during a previous contract. It was supposed to be a top-secret research center, dealing with high-level bioengineering projects for the galaxy's most powerful corporations. No one ever asked too many questions about what went on inside, and that was exactly why the Syndicate had chosen it. Max parked the speeder in an abandoned alley near the facility, its sleek frame blending in with the surroundings. The two of them stepped out, crouching low as they moved toward the entrance. Lara's footsteps were silent, and Max's eyes were scanning the area for any sign of trouble. He had a gut feeling that they weren't the only ones who knew about this place. "This is it," Max whispered, looking up at the high-tech security gates in front of them. "We need to get past the guards, the cameras, and the biolocks. This is going to be tricky." Lara gave him a confident look. "I've had worse, trust me." Max smiled grimly, then pulled out a small, sleek device from his belt. It was a cutting-edge hacking tool he'd picked up from his last job. Stay close and stay quiet. Together, they crept closer to the security system, Max working quickly to bypass the sensors. The hack was delicate. One wrong move and they'd be caught in seconds. But Max had done this before. His fingers flew over the device, and with a soft beep, the gates slowly began to open. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. White walls, fluorescent lights, and rows of secure rooms filled with high-tech equipment. Max could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise. This place wasn't just a research lab, it was a fortress. They moved through the facility like shadows, avoiding guards and security patrols, until they reached the central data hub. It was heavily guarded, but Max had anticipated this. With Lara by his side, they quickly neutralized the two guards at the door, leaving them unconscious but unharmed. Max quickly set to work at the terminal, his fingers moving over the holographic controls. "Give me a minute to access their data," he muttered to Lara, who kept watch. As the data began to transfer to their portable drive, Max's eyes scanned the files on the screen. There it was, Project Harvest, along with a detailed list of the modifications, the test subjects, and the intended outcome. The files were chilling, revealing the full extent of the Syndicate's plans. "They've been experimenting with genetic enhancements," Max murmured, "trying to make hybrid soldiers by combining human DNA with that of other species. And they're using real people, as their test subjects." Lara looked over his shoulder, her face pale as she read the files. "This is worse than I thought. They've been modifying us, making us into weapons." Before Max could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Their time was up. "Time to go," Max said, grabbing the drive and shoving it into his pocket. "We've got what we came for. Now let's get out of here." As they rushed to the exit, Max's mind was already working on their escape. Red Vortex Syndicate wasn't going to let this go. They had to be ready for whatever came next. Max and Lara made their way quickly through the facility, the weight of the stolen data heavy in Max's pocket. The flashing red lights and blaring alarms grew louder, and with each passing second, they knew their time was running out. The Red Vortex Syndicate would waste no time in mobilizing to prevent the leak of their secrets. They had to act fast, or everything they had worked for would be lost. Lara was already ahead of him, moving with practiced speed through the dimly lit corridors of the Genic secure facility. Max followed closely, his senses heightened, his hand ready on the weapon at his side. The two of them were an efficient team, silent, swift, and determined. But even they couldn't avoid the inevitable. As they turned a corner, a sharp voice came from the shadows. "Stop right there." Max's hand flew to his weapon, his eyes darting for an escape route. A group of Syndicate guards stepped out from behind a row of high-tech equipment, their guns raised. Max and Lara were cornered. "You've made a grave mistake," the lead guard snarled. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into." Max glanced at Lara, his mind racing. There was no way out through the front. These were the best of the Syndicate's enforcers. But they weren't the only ones in the facility. "Move fast," Max said under his breath. "We fight our way out." Without hesitation, Max pulled his weapon and fired a quick shot at the nearest guard. The guard crumpled to the ground, the weapon clattering from his hand. But more were closing in, and Max knew they couldn't keep this up forever. He glanced at Lara, who was already moving toward the next guard with fluid, graceful precision. She had been trained for situations like this. Max was impressed. As the gunfire rang out, Max's tactical mind began calculating the best escape route. His eyes fell on a ventilation shaft above them. It was their only chance. "Up there!" Max shouted to Lara, pointing toward the grate. Lara didn't need another word. She sprinted forward, dodging a blast that narrowly missed her, and began climbing the metal ladder that led to the shaft. Max followed close behind, covering her as she ascended. The guards were in pursuit, but their shots were ineffective in the cramped hallway. Once they reached the top, Max quickly removed the vent cover, pulling Lara into the narrow space just as the guards arrived below. They crawled through the shaft, the metal walls cold against their skin, but the air was relatively clear of the chaos happening below. The muffled sounds of the fight echoed in the distance as they made their way toward the exit. When they emerged from the ventilation shaft, they found themselves in a deserted storage area, just a few levels below the surface. Max's heart raced as he caught his breath, but there was no time to relax. They had what they came for, but they couldn't afford to stop yet. They still had to get out of the facility and make it back to the safe house. "This isn't over," Lara said, her voice firm. "We've only just scratched the surface." Max looked at her, his face hardening. "I know, there's more. Much more." He pulled out the data drive, scanning the encrypted files once more. The details were clearer. Now Project Harvest was far more insidious than they realized. Not only were the Syndicate experimenting with genetic modifications, but they were creating hybrid soldiers beings designed to be loyal to the Syndicate and enhance their power across the galaxy. But there was something even darker at play. The files showed evidence that the Genex Corporation was partnering with high-ranking government officials, including Varnak Voller, the head of planetary security. Max felt a chill run down his spine as he pieced together the implications. This wasn't just a criminal syndicate out of control. This was a conspiracy at the highest level. "They're not just creating soldiers," Max murmured, his voice tense. "They're building an army of hybrids to control the galaxy, and they've got the backing of the most powerful people in the government." Lara's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the full scope of what Max had uncovered. "And they've been doing this in secret for years. They've been breeding humans with other species, experimenting on us like we're lab rats." Max shook his head. "This goes deeper than we thought. If we don't expose them soon, they'll have enough power to overthrow entire systems." Lara's fists clenched, her blue skin flushing with anger. "We need to stop them. Not just for me, but for everyone they've hurt. We can't let this continue." Max nodded in agreement. "We won't, but we need more evidence. We need to go after Varnak Voller. He's the one pulling the strings." As they made their way toward the exit, Max could already feel the walls closing in. The Syndicate wasn't going to give up easily. They were coming for them, and they knew it. Just as they reached the outer perimeter of the facility, Max checked the security feed. "They're onto us," he said, his voice urgent. "We have company." Lara looked at him, her expression focused. "We don't have much time. Let's move." They sprinted toward the speeder, but before they could reach it, a heavily armed Syndicate team appeared in front of them, blocking their path. The sound of their boots echoed in the quiet night as they closed in, weapons raised. Max and Lara exchanged a glance, and then without hesitation, they both charged forward, weapons drawn. The battle was brief but intense. Max and Lara fought with the fluidity of people who had been trained for moments like this. But despite their skill, they were outnumbered. Just as Max thought they might be overwhelmed, a familiar voice crackled through his earpiece. "Max, Lara, get out of there. We've got backup on the way." It was Zane, Max's contact in the underground resistance. "Thanks for the timely intervention," Max said, breathless but smiling. "Get us out of here." With the last of the Syndicate forces defeated, they made their way back to the speeder, just as reinforcements arrived. The underground resistance had come through for them. As they sped away from the facility, Max allowed himself a moment to breathe. "We did it," Lara said softly, her voice filled with relief. "We did," Max agreed, but his expression remained grim. "But this isn't over. We've got the evidence, but the fight's just begun." The escape had been too close. Max and Lara had barely made it out of the genetically secure facility, but their mission was far from over. As they sped through the city in the speeder, Max's mind kept racing, processing everything they had uncovered. The data drive was burning a hole in his pocket, and with it, the fate of countless lives. The Syndicate was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind it all lay a much larger web, one woven with the threads of power, corruption, and manipulation. The stakes were higher than Max had ever imagined. "Where are we going?" Lara's voice broke through his thoughts. She sat next to him in the speeder, still tense but trying to focus on the task ahead. "We need to go to the safe house first," Max said, his eyes scanning the cityscape, the neon lights reflecting off the metal buildings. "We'll lay low for now. But once we've decrypted the rest of the files, we'll need to take this to the Galactic Council." Lara nodded, her gaze distant. "I don't know if they'll listen to us. The Syndicate has powerful allies. And if Varnak Voller is involved." Her voice trailed off, and Max could hear the unease in her words. Max's grip tightened on the controls. "They will listen. We have proof. And once the whole galaxy sees what they've been doing, they won't have a choice." As they neared their destination, a nondescript building hidden in a quiet district of the city, Max's thoughts wandered back to the files they had stolen. Project Harvest wasn't just an experiment. It was a weapon, a tool to shape the future of the galaxy in the Syndicate's image. They were creating a hybrid army, an unstoppable force designed to rule. But what terrified Max most was the fact that the Syndicate wasn't working alone. Varnak Voller, the head of planetary security, had been pulling the strings. He was at the heart of this conspiracy, and if anyone knew how deep the rot went, it was him. Inside the safe house, Max immediately started working on the data, his mind sharp and focused. Lara paced behind him, glancing occasionally at the security screens. They had a few hours before the Syndicate's forces would launch another search for them, and that was all they had to decrypt the most critical files and make sense of the full scope of the operation. As the files slowly unfolded before him, Max's heart sank with each passing revelation. The Genex Corporation had partnered with the Council of Galactic Leaders, funding experiments that went far beyond military ambitions. The plan was to use genetic modifications not only to create soldiers, but to alter the balance of power across the entire galaxy. Human and alien hybrid warriors were only the beginning. The ultimate goal was to restructure the very fabric of galactic society, placing the Syndicate and their allies at the top of the food chain. Max paused for a moment, the weight of the information sinking in. They've been playing the long game. This goes back decades. The Syndicate's been infiltrating government systems, manipulating political factions, and breeding hybrids as a way to create the perfect army. Lara stopped pacing and moved closer to him. And the Galactic Council? Do you think they've known all along? Max sighed, rubbing his eyes. I'm not sure. But I think we've been walking right into a trap. Varnak Voller is too well connected. If the Syndicate's using him, there's no telling how many other high-ranking officials are involved. This isn't just a criminal operation, it's a coup. Lara's gaze hardened. Then we need to expose him. We can't let them get away with this. Max nodded. We will. But it's going to take more than just a few hacked files. We need hard evidence, something undeniable that will make the galaxy take notice. And I know just where to find it. The safe house felt like a temporary haven, but Max knew it couldn't be a permanent solution. They had uncovered a monumental conspiracy, and now it was time to take it straight to the top. Max began drafting a plan to infiltrate Varnak Voller's estate, a heavily fortified compound located in one of the wealthiest sectors of Neo-Terra City. It was known as Voller Keep, a place of both political power and wealth, a symbol of the security chief's influence. If Max and Lara were going to expose the truth, they would need to break into the heart of the beast and retrieve the evidence that could bring Voller down. Lara leaned over Max's shoulder, studying the map of Voller Keep displayed on the holoscreen. We'll need to move fast. Voller's security is top-notch. There's no way we can just walk in. Max nodded. It's not about walking in. It's about slipping through the cracks. Voller is too busy with the Syndicate's agenda to notice us sneaking in. He thinks he's untouchable. Lara smiled, her expression fierce. Let's prove him wrong. They began planning their infiltration, drawing on their combined skills, Max's tactical expertise, and Lara's intimate knowledge of high-security environments. The plan was simple. Enter through a service tunnel, bypass the lower-level security, and access Voller's private vault where all the incriminating evidence was stored. As the night grew darker, their anticipation grew. They both knew what was at stake if they succeeded. They would expose a conspiracy that would rock the very foundations of the galaxy. If they failed, they would likely never see the light of day again. Max took a deep breath and stood up, gathering his equipment. All right, let's do this. Lara gave him a determined look. Together, Max grinned, his heart pounding, always. With their plan in motion, they set off toward Voller Keep, knowing that the path ahead would be the most dangerous yet. But they had come too far, and the truth was just within their grasp. It was time to bring the fight to Varnak Voller. The night sky over Neo-Terra City was filled with the hum of distant engines and the glow of neon signs that seemed to promise endless possibilities. But for Max and Lara, the city had become a battleground, a place where their fight for justice would define the future of the galaxy. Max and Lara stood together, gazing out at the skyline from the rooftop of a safe house they had taken refuge in after infiltrating Varnak Voller's estate. The data they had collected was now in the hands of the Galactic Council, and the storm was just beginning. The truth had been exposed, the dark web of corruption, power, and manipulation that stretched from the Syndicate all the way to the highest echelons of government had been laid bare for the galaxy to see. The coup that Voller and his allies had been orchestrating was no longer a shadow in the dark. It was a blinding light of truth that would tear down the walls they had built. But as the news rippled across the stars, the reality of their victory started to settle in. The Council was already calling for hearings and investigations. The Syndicate's leaders were being hunted, and those who had backed their twisted agenda were being forced into the open. Varnak Voller, once an untouchable figure, had been arrested, his empire crumbling beneath the weight of their revelations. Lara looked at Max, her blue eyes bright with a mixture of relief and determination. We did it. We stopped them. Max turned to face her, his gaze soft but resolute. No, Lara, we exposed them, but the work's far from over. This galaxy is too big, and too many others like Voller are out there. We've just opened the door, and the truth is only the beginning. Lara smiled slightly, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. So what's next? Are we done? Max chuckled softly. Done? Not even close. There's still a lot of work to do, and plenty of people who need help. I didn't get into this business for fame or fortune. I got into it because there are people out there who need protecting. And I'm not about to stop now. The weight of their journey together was heavy, but for the first time, it felt like a shared mission, a new understanding. They had been through hell and back, but the bond between them had only grown stronger. They had not only fought for justice, they had fought for something deeper, for a future where no one could be used or discarded as if their lives didn't matter. Lara took a deep breath, feeling the cool air of the city wash over her. So what's the plan? Another mission? Another syndicate to take down? Max looked up at the stars, the vastness of the universe stretching out before him. There's always another fight, but this time I think we need to focus on something a little more personal. Lara raised an eyebrow, sensing a shift in the air. Personal? Max turned back to her, his expression more serious than ever. There are more than just political forces in this galaxy that need to be dealt with. There are entire species on the brink of extinction, civilizations that have been forgotten or oppressed. There are still so many that don't have a voice. We can help them together. Lara's lips curved into a grin, her blue skin glowing softly in the moonlight. And how do you suggest we do that? Max's smile matched hers, one step at a time. But I think it's time to start something new, something that will last longer than a single battle. We'll become the voice for those who have none. We'll help shape the future, one mission at a time. As they stood there, side by side, looking out at the galaxy, they both knew that this was only the beginning of a new journey. There would be no shortage of dangers, challenges, or enemies, but they were no longer just two individuals fighting for survival. They were partners fighting for the future of the galaxy, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And as the stars twinkled above, Max couldn't help but feel a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in years. The fight for justice was far from over, but they would face it together, stronger than ever. The winds of change were blowing, and a new chapter had begun. The galaxy had been forever altered by Max and Lara's actions, but their journey was just beginning. The Syndicate had fallen, but there were other forces far darker than they could ever have imagined, lurking in the corners of the stars. The Council's investigations were just the first step toward an era of greater accountability. But what about the planets that were still suffering under the thumb of tyrannical rule? What about the species struggling to survive in the margins of the galaxy? Max and Lara had paved the way for a new revolution, one where the voices of the oppressed would no longer be silenced. But the path ahead would not be easy. As the dust settled on their victory, they began to realize that the universe was full of untold stories, untapped power, and uncharted territories that would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. With each passing day, their bond would strengthen and their resolve would be tested. Together, they would face not only the enemies of the present, but the shadows of the past that still haunted the stars. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would become the catalysts for a new age of unity and peace across the galaxy.